Okay. Let's dive into his book. What does he specifically mention about Afghanistan?
So with regard to Afghanistan, Bolton says that, he's not a nation builder. He doesn't believe in spending billions of dollars on reconstructing Afghanistan. His primary aim is a counterterrorism mission. And the fact that people believe that nation building and a better standard of living will improve people's lives is a Marxist ideal that he doesn't buy, because he also says that he's a follower of Adam Smith in economics. Now, I actually happen to agree with Bolton on that. I don't think the evidence that a better standard of living, a better material standard of living will avert extremism is, I don't think that evidence can substantiate the claim, especially with regard, we saw Burhan Osman's article recently with regard to Daesh in Afghanistan, where actually, contrary to the claims of many, Daesh, who are more extreme than the Taliban, are generally comprised of people that are highly educated, of urban backgrounds, that are of urban wealthy backgrounds. If we speak about Vladimir Lenin, I believe he was from a very rich family as well, who ended up
how about John Bolton? He's also an extremist who was attracted to Barry Goldwater, and he has all these extremist ideas, and he is a Yale graduate.
Bolton himself is creme de la creme in society. He's a career politician. He's obviously very wealthy, highly educated. Doesn't really stop him from being, as extreme as as some of the other groups that we mentioned. Now, obviously, that means that with regard to Afghanistan, Bolton himself is opposed to Trump repeatedly, voicing his desire to withdraw. Bolton, and I think it shows. See, I don't believe that Bolton is an idiot, okay? Now, Bolton himself in the book says that Trump asked about his views on an Afghan peace process, and Bolton himself says to Trump that, yes, but we need to eliminate the possibility that the Taliban could establish a safe haven in Afghanistan from where they could take over Pakistan's nukes. Okay? Now, this is something that you hear very often in Washington, and I'm not going to mince my words here. It's absolutely retarded to think this. Okay? Number one, okay? Now, basic logic, okay?
Yeah.
I cannot be in Holland and in the UK at the same time. Okay.
Yes.
Similarly, the Taliban cannot be controlled by Pakistan, as many in DC have articulated, and then come around and take Pakistan's nukes. And obviously, it's the aspect of irrationality that's part and parcel of Orientalism, whereby, the radical Talib terrorist, he'll take over Pakistan's nukes just like that, wake up one morning and have to decide between nuking Hazarajat or having breakfast. It doesn't work like that, okay? So the fact that, and like I said, Bolton himself is not an idiot. So the fact that he's thinking this, or he's articulating it to Trump, is showing that he's using quite an elaborate theory to Trump, who is not as sophisticated in his knowledge of foreign policy as he would like to be.
And when with regards to Afghanistan, so obviously Donald Trump was at a certain point very liked and actually revered by many people in Kabul, because he appeared as a president who is going to help President Ashraf Ghani and his government. And there are many Afghans who were praising Donald Trump, especially.
Oh yeah.
But then during his administration, Donald Trump decided to start negotiating with the Taliban. While this was happening, while this was going on, there was a sudden shift. Trump was no longer the warmongering president who wanted to bomb Afghanistan endlessly. He suddenly became someone who wanted to actually pull out of Afghanistan. So with that regard, how would you say, in his book, how does Bolton describe this particular aspect of Trump's policy?
So it's actually very interesting, and it's pretty damning both for Kabul and Washington. So if we recall correctly, Trump's Secretary of Defense was a man called General Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, they called him, who came in with a very macho image, no bullshit kind of standard classical military man. Now, I'm going to read out a quote, okay? Actually, let me describe the context of the quote. So what happens is that Trump comes into office and he wants to withdraw from Afghanistan and is actually convinced by his advisors that, no, you know what, we should stay the course. We can defeat the Taliban. It's not yet too late. Okay? It's not yet too late. We should escalate the war with the Taliban because these are terrorists, whatever, and the Afghan government will help them out. Okay? Now, Bolton writes that in late 2018, Trump had completely lost hope. Okay? And he kept saying stuff like, I should have listened to my own instincts instead of listening to my generals. I should have pulled out. And what we have to also notice how subservient Kabul was with regard to Trump's outbursts. So if we remember, Trump threatened to nuke Afghanistan and kill millions of people whilst Imran Khan, the Pakistani prime minister, was sat right next to him. We didn't really hear anything from Kabul. Trump also spoke about the fact that the Soviet Union in 1979 was defending its borders from terrorists in Afghanistan. And the response of the Afghan Foreign Ministry was to ask for clarification. I mean, how much more clear would you want Donald Trump to be? But it's also, we hear that Ashraf Ghani is an American puppet and all of that sort of. The foreign minister of Afghanistan at this point was Salahuddin Rabbani, who is the son of Professor Burhanuddin Rabbani, who was one of the biggest, arguably the biggest Mujahideen leader. So Trump, in essence, is cussing Salahuddin's father here, but obviously Salahuddin was being nice and he asked for a clarification. But this, despite all of this subservience from Kabul, Kabul playing ball, just lying flat in the face of Trump's quite embarrassing outbursts, you have threats to kill millions of people and delegitimizing the rebellion against the Soviets, Trump doesn't actually seem to know the distinction between Hamid Karzai and Ashraf Ghani. Okay? Trump rides into, this is something that was really big and embarrassing for Ghani in Afghanistan. Trump flies into Bagram. He basically summons Ghani into Bagram Air Base, and I think there was something like they disarmed Ashraf Ghani's bodyguards. Okay? This really, was quite embarrassing for Ashraf Ghani. It showed in the eyes of many people that Ashraf Ghani was an American puppet. But Trump doesn't know the difference between Ashraf Ghani and Karzai. Bolton writes that, that if Trump could wrap his head around this, it would have saved a lot of headache. Okay? So this is,
So how would you describe how did Bolton describe the fact that President Trump doesn't know the difference between Ghani and Karzai?
So Trump keeps going on about how corrupt Ghani is, and he's bringing up corruption cases that are actually related to Karzai. So there was one instance, I don't believe the house in question is owned by Karzai, but Trump is going off about, Ghani has built this massive palace in Dubai. And Bolton is saying from actual research, it was known that Ashraf Ghani did not own that palace. Okay. And another thing, it shows a total lack of respect for Ashraf Ghani, for the Afghan government. So there's one point in the book where Pompeo, who was the foreign secretary of the US, is telling Trump, yes, but Ashraf Ghani is the commander-in-chief of the Afghan armed forces. And Trump's immediate response is, oh, well, who's paying them?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this reminds me, by the way, of an often repeated claim by many of Ashraf Ghani supporters. They say Ashraf Ghani used to be Donald Trump's teacher. He lectured Donald Trump. So if that's even true, Trump has a lot of contempt for his former teacher.
and I think another so I mean we've covered the fact that Trump really doesn't look at Ashraf Ghani with respect. And we spoke with Wahid Fakiri in our podcast as well, where he said that Trump seems to have a tendency to like strong personalities. Okay? Now we see it with Kim Jong-un. We see it with Vladimir Putin. And we see it with Mullah Bradar Akhund, who is the head of the political office of the Taliban in Qatar. Ashraf Ghani's clearly not been a strong personality in the face of Trump. Why? Because he's quite embarrassingly dependent on him. Okay? But moving on from Ashraf Ghani, we also get the sense of how despondent Trump is with regard to the war in Afghanistan. So we come to General Mattis, who I mentioned earlier, and Trump is screaming at General Mattis saying, I gave you what you asked for. Unlimited authority, no holds barred. You're losing, you're getting your ass kicked. You failed. In another bit, he's saying, I gave you complete discretion except for nuclear weapons, and look at what happened. Right? And what Trump is talking about here is the mother of all bombs that was dropped in Nangarhar province. All right? Which is the biggest non-nuclear weapon that the US poses. And, so in 2016, obviously the Americans were at war with the Taliban. Trump comes in and becomes convinced that, some of the controls on airstrikes, on aerial bombardments, on night raids need to be lifted in order to make progress against the Taliban. Okay? Well, actually, and I did a bit of research into this as well. It was the Bureau of Investigative Journalism from which I got the numbers. So in 2017, right, there were 1,071, roughly, American airstrikes in Afghanistan. This is the last year of Obama's presidency. In 2017, there are 2,000...
the last figure that you mentioned? That was 2016?
That was 2016.
Yes.
So we've got 1,071 American airstrikes in Afghanistan throughout that year. In 2017, we've got 2,608. Now that is more than double. Okay? Almost triple. 2.6 times, essentially. In 2018, we have 1,985. So we're still around the 2,000 mark. In 2019, Sangar, okay, when the Taliban and the Americans were negotiating with each other all throughout this year, bar a small disruption, we have 7,167 airstrikes. So what this shows is that General Mattis is routinely blamed by Trump for asking for relaxing in restrictions in the rules and engagement, and wasn't able to deliver because the Taliban kept gaining territory every year. Now, that is pretty damning, okay? It's pretty damning because obviously there was no objection at all voiced from Kabul with regard to this mass bombardment that was undertaken during Trump's presidency. It was actually, in fact, even cheered.
And aside from using nuclear bombs, basically Trump allowed General Mattis to use anything.
Anything.
And
anything goes. Anything goes. And Mattis failed to deliver. But this is the important point. Mattis stopped being the defense secretary on January the 1st, 2019. Okay? But Trump still stuck to the same policy. In fact, like I said, 2018, 1,985 airstrikes. 2019, the year in which Mattis is no longer defense secretary, 7,168. Okay? So it shows that Trump stuck to this policy. Despite him blaming Mattis for it, Mattis is obviously to blame for the massive loss of life that's been caused, Trump stuck to the same policy. Why? Because it was thought that doing so would gain more leverage in the negotiating table with the Taliban.
So, how does Bolton look at this whole policy of Donald Trump? How does he characterize this particular approach that Donald Trump chose in first part of his presidency?
He's totally indifferent to it. Now, the book is obviously a rant against Trump, basically. So if he's indifferent to something, it means that there's tacit approval at the very least. And so we're coming to the point in the book where we're getting to Trump wanting to make a peace deal with the Taliban. So for those of us that remember, there were talks of a peace deal. Suicide attack went off in Kabul. Trump called off the peace deal and said that I was going to invite the Taliban to Camp David, but they killed our soldiers, so we're no longer going to do it. In the run-up to this, Trump says, we'll say we're going to flatten the country if they allow attacks from Afghanistan. They being the Taliban. Bolton points out, I pointed out we had already done that once and we needed a better answer. Okay? So Bolton here is actually shining the light pretty embarrassingly on what kind of stuff the American-led humanitarian mission of the last 19 years in Afghanistan has consisted of.
They flattened Afghanistan with bombs.